Imagine a server farm, one of those sprawling windowless fortresses humming in the desert. Inside, 10,000 GPUs are lit up, training the next frontier model. The air shimmers with waste heat. This isn't just computation, it's a controlled star, consuming more power per second than a town of 10,000 people. We call this progress. But follow the thick, shin-high cables out of the building. Trace them back across the scrubland. They don't lead to some futuristic energy source. They plug into the same aging, overloaded grid that powers your dishwasher. A grid built for the 20th century, now groaning under the appetite of a 21st century silicon leviathan. We are trying to birth a god with the extension cord from a tool shed. The real bottleneck isn't in the code. It's in the transformer, not the AI model, the electrical one on the pole outside. Every leap in intelligence requires an order of magnitude leap in energy. Yet for 50 years, we've enforced a global pause on the one technology capable of delivering that: nuclear fission. We locked it away, not because the science failed, but because fear wrote the regulations. We chose perceived safety over existential capability. So here is the silent, slow-motion suicide of our ambition. We are building minds that can reason about the universe, while deliberately starving them of the power they need to do it. We're attempting the greatest project in history with one hand tied behind our back by our own past. The path forward isn't just about better algorithms, it's about a rebellion. A physical, concrete rebellion against an engineered scarcity of energy itself. Okay, let's unpack this. That was the emotional reality of the current moment. The mission for this deep dive is clear. We are tracing the connection between the exponential appetite of AI and the sudden, urgent shift toward decentralized nuclear energy solutions. This isn't just about electricity. It's about technological sovereignty, national competitiveness, and a radical philosophical push against the limits we have imposed upon ourselves. We're going to investigate how the global race for AI supremacy is driving a paradigm shift toward decentralized nuclear energy solutions like small modular reactors or SMRs, and how that's fundamentally altering national energy security and the geopolitical landscape. This is a story about physics, philosophy, and power in every sense of the word.
To really ground this almost existential debate, we have to start with the numbers. The sheer unprecedented demand for AI compute. These facilities, they're not just growing, they're exploding in size and density, and the data. Well, the data is frankly shocking. Between just 2020 and 2023, AI data center power demand grew tenfold.
Tenfold. In 3 years.
Tenfold. It soared from about 0.4 gigawatts to 4.3 gigawatts. That kind of exponential increase is it's unheard of in traditional infrastructure planning.
That is a massive acceleration curve. So what happens when we look forward? I mean, we're seeing continued investment, massive production of AI chips.
Yeah.
Where does that trajectory take us?
Well, if we just extrapolate the current growth in specialized chip supply, which is running at a median annual growth rate of about 1.7 times, the projections become frankly staggering. By the year 2027, so just 3 years from now, AI data centers are projected to require 68 gigawatts globally.
Whoa, hang on. 68 gigawatts. Let's try to put that into perspective for everyone listening.
Exactly. For perspective, the entire power capacity of the state of California in 2022 was about 86 gigawatts.
So you're saying AI compute demand on its own will soon require a capacity approaching the total generation of our most populous and industrialized U.S. state.
Yes. And furthermore, this appetite means that AI alone is projected to drive an estimated 180% growth in global data center capacity between 2022 and 2027.
That's a colossal burden. And 2027 is the near future. What happens if this scaling keeps going to the end of the decade?
If the current scaling persists to 2030, the global demand projection hits 327 gigawatts.
327.
Yes. Now, there are other estimates out there. Goldman Sachs has a slightly lower prediction, maybe 24 gigawatts by 2030. But the overwhelming consensus, and this is backed by hardware manufacturing, by the chip supply chain data, is massive, immediate, and sustained exponential growth. We're witnessing the birth of an entirely new industrial load that is, for all intents and purposes, behaving like a runaway train.
To make that scale relatable, you really have to think about the energy density. We're not talking about gradual growth spread out across a country. We're talking about these controlled stars being lit up in single locations, and they have to be fed constantly.
That's a great way to put it. Look at the example of xAI's planned Colossus supercomputer in Memphis, Tennessee. That single facility is designed to house 100,000 AI chips. It will require 150 megawatts of continuous power.
And what does 150 megawatts look like in the real world?
It's the equivalent of powering roughly 53,000 typical U.S. households. simultaneously, or it's the continuous output of about 55 modern wind turbines just for one building. It's an enormous concentrated load that strains local infrastructure immediately. It demands a substation upgrade, massive dedicated transmission lines, just to keep it from blacking out the neighborhood.
And that concentrated load brings us to a really unique challenge, right? AI training runs. They're vastly different from just, running a cloud server for email. The energy isn't just consumed, it's consumed in one spot for a long, long time.
Precisely. AI training presents a unique load challenge. It requires massive capacity, all centralized in one location, and that capacity is increasing faster than ever. The compute used for training the most advanced frontier models is currently increasing by about 4 to 5 times per year.
4 to 5 times. So Moore's law on steroids, but for energy consumption.
That's exactly it. And this is where the physics starts to betray the ambition. You mentioned that chip efficiency. It just isn't keeping pace with that raw appetite.
So the energy requirement grows almost as fast as the compute itself.
That's the critical point. While training compute is increasing 4 to 5 times per year, the energy efficiency of the chips themselves, the work done per joule, only improves about 1.3 times annually. That means the required power for the largest training runs is effectively increasing 2.7 times per year. The incremental gains from new chip designs are they're dwarfed by the sheer number of chips we're throwing at the problem. We're physically consuming more raw energy.
So if we follow that trend line, what does a single dedicated training data center look like in just a few years?
The numbers are sobering. By 2027, a data center that's hosting a large, state-of-the-art training run could require as much power as a typical conventional nuclear power plant.
A whole nuclear plant.
About 1 gigawatt, all centralized in one location. A single consumer demanding the entire output of a major generation facility.
And that capacity requirement is just accelerating like crazy, demanding site planning and power procurement that we just never seen before.
It accelerates right out of the realm of normal utility planning. By 2029, a single training cluster could surpass the combined capacity of the entire Northern Virginia data center hub, which is currently the world's largest at 3.4 gigawatts. If this scaling continues, by 2030, a single frontier model training cluster could require the equivalent of 8 nuclear reactors.
8?
Even if you manage to distribute that workload across, say, 4 clusters, each one would still need more than a gigawatt of firm power.
The technical demand is clearly unprecedented. It's almost science fiction. But the U.S. competitive advantage hinges on whether we can physically deliver that power. And that seems to be running into some very mundane, real-world bottlenecks, that old extension cord problem you mentioned.
That's the core challenge. The aging grid metaphor is very real. The U.S. faces at least 5 major obstacles here. First is just insufficient, reliable power generation. We are adding capacity, sure, but most of it is intermittent wind and solar. And that doesn't provide the firm, dispatchable power these data centers require 99% of the time.
So we end up relying on older, dirtier generation sources to fill the gaps.
Exactly.
I'm a little surprised by that we have batteries, right? We have storage. Can't that solve the intermittency issue?
We do, but not at the scale needed to backstop gigawatt-level demand for days, let alone weeks. These AI data centers are Tier 3 or Tier 4 facilities. That means they are designed for continuous operation with almost zero downtime. That demands firm baseload power. Intermittent sources, even with existing battery energy storage systems, BESS, they require huge, expensive overbuild capacity and long-duration storage to match the consistency of a gas turbine or a nuclear plant.
And even when the power is technically available nearby, the delivery systems are failing, which creates these huge delays.
Inadequate transmission infrastructure is the second huge bottleneck. Transmission projects are notoriously difficult. They take years to permit. They need federal, state, and local approvals. And they often just lack the capacity. Then you've got lengthy data center permitting itself. That's the third issue. And fourth, we're seeing acute supply chain issues. You're waiting more than a year for things like large transformers and emergency generators.
And the single most immediate bottleneck, the one that just tells the AI developer, stop, is the grid connection itself.
Absolutely. The queue for grid connections in high-density areas like Northern Virginia, the largest data center state in the world, has just ballooned. Wait times for a new large-scale connection are now 4 to 7 years.
4 to 7 years.
Think about that. A tech company starts planning a data center today, and by the time they get the power connection, the AI chips they plan to put inside are already 2 or 3 generations old. The technology is obsolete before they can even plug it in.
That delay is astonishing. So if the U.S. can't resolve these physical constraints, if it fails to provide the estimated 51 gigawatts needed by 2027 to host, 75% of global compute, what are the geopolitical consequences of outsourcing this infrastructure?
It's a massive compromise to U.S. technological sovereignty and economic competitiveness. If domestic infrastructure isn't available, U.S. companies are basically forced to relocate their AI infrastructure abroad, to countries that offer faster permitting and more reliable power. We're already seeing it. Major tech companies are looking at expansion plans in other countries, like Microsoft's reported $1.5 billion investment in the UAE's G42.
So we're not just exporting data centers. We're exporting the foundational physical infrastructure of future AI dominance. Compute is. It's the primary enabler of AI progress.
It is the new strategic resource. A lack of domestic infrastructure compromises the U.S. competitive advantage. It increases the risk of intellectual property theft, unauthorized access to frontier models. I mean, if your crown jewels, the models, the training data, are hosted in a jurisdiction with weaker IP laws, the risk just skyrockets.
Yeah.
And it complicates the enforcement of U.S. semiconductor export controls, like the ones against China. If U.S. companies can't host the compute here, they're forced to export the whole package, chips, systems, everything. It makes control and oversight so much more complex.
And these facilities become prime targets for state-sponsored cyber attacks.
Prime targets. Securing AI compute is increasingly challenging abroad, where oversight and control are limited.
The urgency of this energy crisis and that profound frustration with the regulatory bottlenecks you just laid out, the 4-7-year wait times, the permitting, it's all been heavily adopted by this radical ideological movement in Silicon Valley. This isn't just about utility planning for them. It's a philosophical demand for abundance.
And that's where we get into effective accelerationism, or easy adherence. It's a powerful ideological force that's gaining a lot of mainstream visibility in tech circles. You have high-profile VCs and entrepreneurs like Mark Andreessen and Gary Tan endorsing it. At its core, it's a techno-optimist movement. It advocates for unrestricted technological progress, especially AI, as the necessary solution to basically all human problems: poverty, disease, war, you name it.
So it's an unapologetic stance that technology will inevitably save us, and any attempt to slow it down, regulate it, or restrict its energy source is not just misguided, but actively dangerous to human progress.
They see technology, and specifically intelligence, as the ultimate force for resource maximization. They view themselves as a counterweight to cautious views, often labeling their opponents as doomers or decellerationists. There's a utopian undertone to it, arguing that faster, harder AI progress is the only way to ensure human survival and, eventually, the propagation of consciousness throughout the universe.
And this ties directly back to their definition of civilizational success, which is the Kardashev scale. And that is fundamentally an energy scale, right?
That's their central philosophical driver. The Kardashev scale measures the civilization's advancement based on the amount of energy it can harness. According to Guillaume Verdon, one of the co-founders, the goal is for humanity to climb the Kardashev gradient. That means maximizing energy usage to ensure survival and rise to the next levels, moving from a planetary energy user type 1 toward a stellar energy user type 2. And they see AGI as fundamental to achieving that energy and tech scaling.
And that philosophical belief system immediately dictates their highly libertarian and anti-regulatory stance, especially when it comes to the barriers we were just discussing.
Absolutely. The movement is strongly opposed to government intervention and precautionary regulation of AI. Many proponents have intensely libertarian views. They argue that unrestricted development and competition in decentralized free markets will inherently create the best outcomes, and that includes AI alignment.
So they believe decentralized competitive markets mitigate AI existential risk better than centralized regulation.
That's their argument, yes. They say that 1,000 different AI projects are harder to shut down, harder to control, and thus more resilient than one giant government-controlled AI.
Wait a minute, though. That claim that decentralized markets mitigate existential risk better, that directly contradicts decades of standard risk management philosophy, especially in things like nuclear safety or aerospace. How do they justify that leap of faith?
They argue that the speed and unpredictability of AI progress mean that regulatory bodies just can't keep pace. They claim slow, centralized regulation introduces systemic risk by creating single points of failure, or worse, by falling under the control of actors with misaligned interests. By allowing rapid, decentralized development, they believe competitive pressure and sheer speed will outpace any potential single threat before it can stabilize. The ultimate alignment mechanism, in their view, is just continued, unrestricted technological growth.
So if they see energy abundance as the prerequisite for this AGI-driven civilizational survival, then anything that blocks the energy needed for AI is, well, it's an enemy of progress.
Yeah.
An existential threat in itself.
They frame enforced scarcity as a great filter, the barrier that prevents civilizations from scaling up to survive long term. They argue that current global nuclear regulatory bodies, environmentalist movements, lengthy licensing timelines. All of these are inadvertently creating this filter by impeding the rapid deployment of essential energy sources like SMRs. In their view, enforced scarcity is the real enemy of human ambition.
And this isn't just theory being debated on social media. It's translating into significant political action, isn't it? Especially when they see an opportunity for deregulation.
It is translating into active lobbying and political support, absolutely. Following recent political shifts, high-profile tech figures aligned with this philosophy have explicitly pushed for deregulation. This means removing unnecessary red tape to ease constraints not just on tech mergers, but critically on energy project permitting. Their goal is direct. Use political pressure to physically remove the regulatory barriers that are starving AI of the power it needs.
Okay, so the problem is now clear. Exponential, immediate demand is colliding with the limits of 20th century infrastructure and regulatory inertia. It's creating a geopolitical risk. The solution, which seems to satisfy both the East's desire for abundance and the hyperscalers' need for reliability, is firm, continuous nuclear power.
Nuclear is the ideal match for AI demand, almost a necessary one, especially when you compare it directly to intermittent renewables. The foundational design principle of a modern data center is uptime. As we said, these are Tier 3 or Tier 4 facilities, demanding power availability over 99% of the time. The highest tier is up to 99.995% uptime.
And intermittent wind and solar, without massive, long-duration energy storage, just can't achieve that standard. That's why we still have gas plants.
Exactly. Renewables require significant, often prohibitively expensive storage to match that consistency. Nuclear, on the other hand, provides firm, dispatchable baseload power. Existing conventional nuclear plants average an incredible 92% capacity factor.
Meaning they're running and generating power 92% of the time.
Yes, and they have a remarkably low 2.5% forced outage rate. This inherent reliability makes nuclear perfectly suited to the stringent, continuous uptime requirements of these data centers.
And we are seeing this realization translate into massive concrete commitments from the biggest AI compute providers. This shift isn't theoretical, it's happening right now.
The industry shift is undeniable, and it's driven by the physics of power density. Hyperscalers are proactively securing firm power sources. Major compute providers are signing deals to bring retired nuclear plants back online. Microsoft, for example, signed a groundbreaking 20-year power purchase agreement, a PPA for 835 megawatts of capacity from the 3 Mile Island generating station.
So they're locking up a vast, reliable power supply for 2 decades.
And these aren't small exploratory projects. Amazon Web Services made a $650 million investment in Pennsylvania to transform a nuclear site into a data center hub, seeking those direct coupling advantages. The market commitment is staggering. Big tech companies have signed contracts or MOUs for more than 10 gigawatts of possible new or extended nuclear capacity in the last year in the U.S. alone. This isn't a preference. It's an all-solutions-on-deck approach to energy procurement.
Given the urgency, though, what's the trade-off right now? If new nuclear capacity takes years to come online, how do they meet the immediate exponential demand while also dealing with decarbonization goals?
This is the massive trade-off that national energy strategies are grappling with. Given the long lead times for new nuclear, the short-term demand for firm supply may require delaying the planned retirement of existing coal and gas power plants. It might even mean fast-tracking new natural gas plants.
So in the immediate future, we're facing a choice. Either slow down the AI race to stick to renewable deployment timelines, or accelerate AI by using the most reliable sources available, which often means fossil fuels for now.
Goldman Sachs analysts suggest the scale of demand growth warrants an and approach, not an or. Natural gas plants are likely to remain a significant part of the mix alongside renewables and nuclear to ensure reliability is met. Tech companies are willing to pay what's called a green reliability premium for certainty of power supply. They value the firm, continuous availability of power over strictly the lowest cost. Downtime is catastrophic for them.
Looking slightly further out, though, the promise of small modular reactors, SMRs, seems to be the perfect architectural and philosophical fit for decentralized sovereign compute. They seem to solve that infrastructure bottleneck.
SMRs are the vision. They promise a flexibility and scalability that large conventional reactors can't offer. They're designed for factory production, meaning they can be manufactured consistently and rapidly. The scalability is inherent. As a data center's demand grows, you can add more SMR modules. And crucially, they're designed with advanced passive safety mechanisms. They can shut down and cool autonomously without external power, which dramatically reduces operational complexity.
And their smaller size means they can be sited closer to the load. Right on the data center campus.
Absolutely. That allows for co-siting. And they offer the ability to divert excess heat for industrial processes, which has secondary economic benefits.
It sounds like the undisputed future. So if SMRs solve so many problems, decentralization, reliability, scalability, what's holding them back from solving the crisis right now in 2024?
The key constraint is readiness for immediate widespread commercial deployment. Despite the immense promise and massive corporate interest in companies like Nescale and TerraPower, SMR technologies are still navigating the final regulatory hurdles for first-of-a-kind deployment. They're not ready for mass commercial rollout just yet. This means for the multi-gigawatt needs of the next few years, gigawatt-scale conventional reactors, or delaying the retirement of existing dispatchable sources, remain the more readily deployable short-term solution.
So this shift to nuclear isn't just a business decision, it's an engineering imperative that re-architects the entire system. Integrating nuclear power fundamentally changes the infrastructure of the data center. So what does this new nuclear-ready architecture look like for the engineers building these facilities?
The most profound structural change is the necessity of co-siting building the data center on the same site or in direct proximity to the nuclear plant. This is to create a direct, behind-the-meter power link, completely bypassing the congested, aging transmission systems.
Okay, let's detail those benefits. How does co-siting help the transmission system?
By localizing supply and demand, it significantly reduces strain on the grid's central transmission systems. The power is generated and consumed next door. This localization avoids or defers costly multi-year infrastructure upgrades for transmission lines. The Susquehanna Steam Electric Station, which has a 1,200-acre co-sited data center campus built with a direct link to the plant, illustrates this perfectly. They've completely avoided central transmission risk.
And we mentioned the incredible heat generated by these AI clusters. Cooling is a huge energy drain. How does co-siting address that?
This is where the engineering gets truly fascinating. The potential for thermal coupling. Data centers use up to a third of their total energy on cooling. Nuclear plants produce vast amounts of waste heat, steam, or hot water. If the facilities are co-sited, the nuclear plant could transfer its low-grade waste heat to the data center to help meet these cooling needs, using things like steam absorption chillers.
Wait, hold on. How does waste heat cool something? That sounds counterintuitive.
It does, but it's very effective. Absorption chillers use a heat source, like steam from the nuclear plant, to drive a refrigeration cycle. This process dramatically reduces the data center's power usage effectiveness, or PUE.
Okay, let's quickly define PUE for everyone.
PUE, or power usage effectiveness, is a metric for data center efficiency. It's the ratio of total energy entering the data center divided by the energy used only for the IT equipment. A perfect PUE is 1.0, meaning zero energy is wasted on cooling or lighting. Most modern data centers run around 1.3 to 1.5. If the nuclear plant's waste heat can power the cooling, the PUE drops dramatically, because the power for cooling is essentially free.
But water consumption is a huge concern for both nuclear plants and data centers, isn't it? Especially in water-stressed regions. Does putting them together just amplify this pressure?
It amplifies the need for strategic water management, and it requires innovative solutions. But joint projects are already providing models. For example, the Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station, in a dry part of Arizona, uses the metropolitan area's wastewater for its cooling. Co-siting projects near water treatment plants can leverage this reclaimed water, turning a liability into a resource loop.
Okay, moving to the power distribution architecture. If an SMR is integrated, the data center campus essentially transforms from just being a load on the grid into a sophisticated microgrid. What are the key architectural decisions there?
The whole approach depends on the SMR's role. First, is the SMR the primary baseload source? If so, commissioning must verify safe, controlled transitions when the SMR trips offline, ensuring a seamless switchover to the utility grid or backup power to maintain uptime.
And what if the SMR is just supplemental, just offsetting grid draw?
If it's a supplemental or hybrid resource, commissioning focuses on verifying the complex control strategies for economic dispatch, when to draw from the cheaper SMR versus the grid. The whole commissioning process becomes this mission-critical integration layer.
For these complex integrated microgrids, what are the technical focuses that commissioning teams have to prioritize? I know there were 3 high-risk areas mentioned.
They focus on 3 high-risk areas essential for stability. First, islanding and black start capabilities. This means verifying the campus can safely disconnect from the main grid, that's islanding, and verifying the system can be brought back from a zero-power state in a controlled way.
And the second focus area, synchronization. That sounds tricky.
It is. The second focus is synchronization and resynchronization. When the microgrid connects back to the main utility grid, the phase, frequency, and voltage must be perfectly synchronized to prevent massive damaging power surges.
And the third, and maybe the most complex, area of integration protection coordination, where utility and nuclear engineers have to agree on what's safe.
That's protection coordination. Introducing an SMR changes all the fault current paths. Fault currents are the massive surges of electricity during a short circuit. Commissioning has to confirm that all the relay settings and circuit breakers are coordinated so that a fault in the data center doesn't inadvertently cause a trip on the nuclear side, which would take the reactor offline, or vice versa. It requires extensive testing to confirm selective tripping, meaning only the device nearest the fault trips. If a data center fault causes the entire nuclear plant to trip, the whole exercise fails.
Let's talk about AI's load volatility again. Nuclear is inherently slow and stable. It's limited to ramping up or down about 5% of its output per minute. How does this slow-moving source possibly deal with AI workloads that can show 15 times larger peak-to-trough drops in seconds?
This mismatch between slow supply and volatile demand is the biggest operational challenge, and it's overcome through integrated energy systems and storage. The mitigation strategy is pairing the nuclear output with energy storage, specifically battery energy storage systems, or BES.
BES, let's just quickly define that again.
BESS is large-scale industrial battery infrastructure. Think Tesla's Powerwall, but scaled up to megawatts. It acts as the buffer reservoir. If nuclear power is a giant, steady river, the AI load is trying to fill 100 water balloons at once. The demand spikes are huge and sudden. The BESS is the buffer, absorbing excess power when AI demand dips and immediately discharging power when AI demand spikes.
So the nuclear plant provides the steady baseload, the long-term capacity, and the BES handles the AI's erratic spikes and dips, smoothing the output before it hits the compute equipment.
Exactly. Excess nuclear power generated during low demand periods is stored in the BESS, or even diverted for other things like synthetic fuel production for backup generators. This enables co-sited data centers to transition from being energy sinks to becoming grid-stabilizing assets. They can provide grid services like frequency regulation.
So even with an SMR providing near-perfect baseload and BESS handling volatility, does that mean the traditional redundancy layers that data center operators swear by UPS diesel generators, do they disappear?
Absolutely not. An SMR, even a highly reliable one, does not eliminate the need for traditional resilience layers. The design still requires UPS systems, uninterruptible power supplies for instantaneous ride-through. It still needs BESS for short-duration support and smoothing. And you still need diesel or natural gas generators for long-duration redundancy during planned maintenance or refueling outages of the SMR. Commissioning has to prove all transfer sequences between all those sources work flawlessly.
We've established that the technical blueprints exist, and the economic driver is overwhelming. Yet the single biggest obstacle to realizing this nuclear-ready AI future might be cultural. This clash of mindsets between the risk-averse, slow-moving nuclear world and the agile, move fast and optimize later tech sector.
The cultural differences are profound, and they translate directly into massive project friction. On one side, you have utilities and nuclear operators. Their focus is safety, regulatory adherence, and long-term planning spanning 10 to 60-year horizons. Their decision-making is necessarily consensus-driven, bureaucratic, and deeply risk-averse. Their speed metric is safe.
And then you have the data center developers and hyperscalers, who are driven by market and competitive cycles measured in months, not decades.
They focus entirely on speed, scalability, and innovation. Their risk tolerance is high because a 6-month delay means losing market share. This fundamental misalignment in planning horizons is crippling joint projects. A utility might need 4 to 7 years for upgrades, while the tech company demands deployment in 12 to 24 months. If the utility is hesitant to commit billions without 50-year certainty, and the developer can't wait 5 years, the project just stalls.
And this friction is made worse by a regulatory framework that just isn't designed for these kinds of hybrid energy solutions. It's built for separate, siloed industries.
The regulatory landscape actively reinforces the silos. Grid interconnection agreements, regulated by FARC, can take 18 to 30 months for approval. That timeline is entirely incompatible with the data center world. This speed mismatch forces companies into complex and often scrutinized behind-the-meter deals.
And we're already seeing regulators push back fiercely against those direct coupling models that bypass the traditional grid structure.
That's the direct coupling scrutiny. Direct behind-the-meter deals, like the famous one with Talon Energy and Amazon, have been denied expansion by FERC. The concern isn't technical, it's one of fairness. Regulators worry that if large consumers like data centers bypass customary fees and grid maintenance costs, it could unfairly shift those costs onto other ratepayers, risking grid stability for everyone else.
And we can't ignore the enormous regulatory burden of security, especially cybersecurity, in a coupled system. You are physically linking a critical piece of national infrastructure, a nuclear plant, to a massive IT operation.
When you couple nuclear and a data center, you dramatically increase the attack surface. Commissioning has to validate strict network separation between the nuclear operational technology OT systems, the microgrid controls, and the data center information technology IT systems.
Can you just quickly clarify the difference between OT and IT in this context?
Absolutely. IT systems handle data, email, business operations. OT, operational technology, handles physical process control, in this case, controlling the valves, pumps, and safety functions of the reactor itself. Nuclear plants operate under strict cybersecurity regimes mandated by the NRC to protect their OT systems. Any connection needs rigorous validation to ensure a breach on the IT side can't spread to the OT side and compromise the reactor's physical safety.
Given this enormous, multifaceted, friction regulatory, cultural, technical command, how can these sectors, which desperately need each other, actually find harmony? It suggests we need new, adaptive models.
Collaboration has to move beyond just talking about technology and start actively managing the cultural gap. One crucial opportunity is establishing joint planning forums. These are structured spaces where all stakeholders can align on timelines, share constraints, and build a shared understanding of risks early on.
And you need people who can bridge that linguistic and corporate cultural gap. Translators, essentially.
We absolutely need liaison roles individuals who can bridge that cultural chasm. They interpret utility planning and safety mandates for fast-moving tech executives and advocate for agile approaches within utilities. They are the diplomats of this whole endeavor.
And what needs to happen on the policy front to specifically expedite this new, strategically vital infrastructure?
We need policy innovation that treats this as a national strategic imperative. This includes creating fast-track permitting pathways for projects that combine nuclear and AI data centers. Also, establishing regulatory sandboxes could allow stakeholders to test new hybrid business models and flexible PPAs without requiring the immediate full regulatory review that slows everything down.
Finally, the report suggests a novel solution to bridge these massive knowledge gaps: the introduction of a fourth player.
The emergence of a fourth intermediary stakeholder is suggested as crucial. This intermediary, a specialized company or consortium, would have multi-domain expertise, tech deployment, nuclear regulation, utility operations, microgrid engineering. Their role would be to efficiently address these cross-sector challenges and act as the integrator, so projects don't stall due to a lack of shared language or expertise.
So this deep dive reveals that the pursuit of AI supremacy is forcing a dramatic reckoning with our legacy energy infrastructure. The projections of power demand are too staggering, rising to 327 gigawatts globally by 2030 to be met by existing means. It's creating an existential fork in the road for technological leadership.
The convergence of the fastest-growing concentrated load AI data centers and the most reliable, firm energy source nuclear power is fundamentally altering national energy security strategies. The need to accelerate nuclear deployment, often in defiance of decades of regulatory inertia, is no longer a niche preference. It's a strategic necessity to maintain a competitive edge.
The path forward isn't just about writing better algorithms or building faster chips. It's about realizing that the constraints on future intelligence are physical and engineered. It requires a profound collaborative effort across these very different worlds, a sustained, difficult rebellion to secure the energy abundance needed to sustain human ambition on its new exponential trajectory.